This week in basketball with your main man OfftheLeezy in the place to be. For a long time, Paul George was one of my favorite players, but over the course of his career, it seems as though his story doesn't make sense. At this point, you can certainly make a case that he's one of the few players whose name and trade value have consistently been greater than his actual basketball presence. It's a somewhat sad yet fascinating conversation. So let's drive and kick it. Imagine telling someone in 2013 there was a player who would become a 9-time All-Star, multiple-time All-NBA player, one of the greatest wing defenders of his generation, and ultimately be traded for some of the most premier talent and role players, including an MVP caliber NBA champion in Jaylen Brown, not to mention a myriad of first-round picks. You'd probably conclude he's one of the most valuable players in the league, ever. Oh, he must have won a championship or two. Nope. At least multiple finals? Never even made one. Scoring champion? Not even. At this point, you'd have to ask yourself, is he even Hall of Fame worthy? The strange thing is, Paul George looks like the perfect basketball player. 6'8", long wingspan, an elite defender who can guard 1 through 4, can handle, can shoot, can score from all 3 levels, creates his own shot, excellent catch and shoot player, great transition player, one of the smoothest wing scorers we've ever seen. If you built the perfect NBA wing in a laboratory, it would probably look like Paul George. Somehow, in a generation of two-way players, he was never quite able to get to the top of the mountain and become that guy. Paul George became the face of the Pacers. He battled LeBron, Wade, and Bosh for years with nothing to show for it. Then came the horrific leg injury. Many people thought he'd never be the same. Instead, he came back, still became an all-star, still became elite, which somehow makes the rest of his career even stranger. Then, Indiana traded him. Where? OKC. The Pacers received Victor Oladipo and a young Domantas Sabonis. That already sounds crazy, but it gets crazier. Paul George actually had the best individual season of his career in Oklahoma City. 29 points per game, league leader in steals, first-team All-NBA, first-team All-Defense, finished 3rd in MVP voting and Defensive Player of the Year voting. Ironically, the season where he looked the closest to being a true superstar was also the season that made him the most valuable trade asset in basketball. Then came the Clippers trade. The Clippers didn't just trade for Paul George. They traded for Paul George and the chance to sign Kawhi Leonard, because he was only going to commit to Los Angeles if they were going to acquire another superstar. So OKC asked for everything. The Clippers gave up SGA, Danilo Gallinari, 5 first-round picks and 2 pick swaps. And to this day, that haul has helped produce an MVP in Shea and key pieces of a championship contender, making it one of the most influential trades of its era. As for the Clippers, this is where everything became weird. Some nights, Paul George looked like the best player on the floor. Other nights, he disappeared. There were injuries, load management, Westbrook, generic Kimbo Slice, playoff P, pandemic P, podcast P. He was never terrible. He was never consistently dominant. He just floated somewhere in between. After leaving the Clippers in free agency, Paul George joined Philadelphia. Although there was a chance he could have played with Stephen Curry and the Warriors, either way, on paper, it seemed somewhat perfect. A championship trio. Joel Embiid, Tyrese Maxey, Paul George. Instead, injury struck again, and suspension, and the hope never really materialized. This is what makes Paul George unlike almost anyone. Teams always benefited, GMs always believed, fans always cheered, and players always respected him. And everywhere he went, he looked like a top 5 caliber player. But over 16 seasons, the resume never matched the talent. No awards, no accolades. We've seen a lot of guys come and go in this league with similar talent. But for some reason, Paul George is just different. Somehow, in an era of generation-defining players, handcuffing franchises and super team building, he has drastically changed the outcome of multiple franchises while perhaps impacting the history of the league off the court more than he has on it. His trades will continue affecting the league for years to come. And maybe that's Paul George's legacy. Not as one of the greatest winners or statistical juggernauts, not as one of the biggest busts or disappointments, but someone talented enough to be traded for future greats while never quite becoming the franchise or era-defining talent everyone kept waiting for him to be. And that's why this is such a complex case. Perhaps he's basketball's greatest P. Great player, valuable piece, ultimate paradox. But at the end of the day, Paul Paul George might just be the most confusing all-star in NBA history.